This is Moving People Forward, a program that offers insights into life challenges that everyday people face, experienced by those who perhaps have more directly faced them in recent days. And you'll understand that more as we go through this. I'm Mark Elfstrand, and because of the COVID-19 era that we're living in right now, we've decided to record our program this time through Zoom rather than using a studio, which we normally do. And we hope to be back in the studio in May, but for now we're going to try this and just to see if we can't help give you some interesting insights from actually a longtime friend of mine. His name is Jim Rabe, and for well over 42 years, Jim was the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety at Masonite, the manufacturer of quality door products based out of Florida. And with that, Jim, thank you for doing this with us today.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to join you on this Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo. Explain your background in corporate safety and that rather long-time role that you had with Masonite.
Sure. The Masonite Corporation has global operations around the world, and they have every plant has needs for environmental compliance as well as safety compliance. Most of my time and energy was spent on safety compliance and helping the people at the plants to have good programs so they could work safely and good programs to respond to situations that might come up, whether it's an emergency or it's some other situation, and that they would have thought through what they're doing to manage the situations as they come up, whether it's COVID-19 or it's a bomb threat. My job was to help the company manage through each of those situations.
Well, 4 decades is really a long time to be doing that. I mean, did the complexity of that kind of work change a lot during that time period?
It really has, Mark. What we're aware of in the world these days and the risks and the threats that can come at us have really expanded the role. It used to be just, how do we wear gloves and wear safety glasses and safety shoes from a safety standpoint? And now it's certainly evolved into a much deeper and a much broader breadth of management skills in order to handle health concerns, concerns that we have from all the products that we use in operations, as well as the products for manufacturing, and ensuring our customers that what they have is a safe product for their use.
What is your overall observation on the ways that corporate America is dealing with the coronavirus?
From my point of view, it appears that the company I work for, Masonite, is for the most part, their plants are open and operating. But you look at the news reports that we get and the information that we know and understand, that there's what they call the essential operations and essential businesses that remain open. But there's a lot of businesses that are closed, and just it varies now. It's varying as states begin to reopen. It varies by state and what is complexity in terms of how do they get themselves reopened? How do we get moving? The social distancing and the home isolation has done a good job in helping to flatten the curve, so to speak. And that was our objective initially as a country and as a world. Now that we've flattened the curve, what we need to understand is what are the real risks from this virus? How does that vary from previous flus that we've had, whether it's the SARS flu or just the normal flu we get every year, and understand how to manage that risk. We're not going to be able to eliminate it. We just can't. And plants and companies that are operating today, I saw that United is opening up and they're going to offer masks and for all their customers and require them to wear them on the planes. And they're not going to have full planes. They're going to have, half loads so that there is distance between their passengers. So they're looking out for the safety of the passengers as well as their own crew, and at the same time trying to get the operations back up and going so people can travel again.
Let's talk about the financial impact on this for just a moment. I mean, I don't know if you probably are looking at the Masonite price, even though you're not employed there anymore, but just to see how their stock is doing. But I mean, the long range impact of businesses staying open. We were just talking about United, And I just was reading an article about Hertz that they may be filing bankruptcy as a rental car corporation. I mean, we're only
Yeah.
talking a month and a half, 2 months into this thing. This is pretty serious in terms of economic impact.
It is, Mark. And what's concerning to me is the different business types that you have and how I can see, and I think how we project they're going to open back up. For one example, that's a good one, I think, is haircuts, right? I surely need one. And I think as soon as they open, people will be making appointments and they'll be busy from day one. But you have many, many other businesses, restaurants, for example, and others that when they open, it's not going to be flooded with people. It's going to be a slower recovery of people coming out, and they're going to probably restrict, maybe every third table can be used, or maybe every other table. And it's going to be a much slower recovery for them. And the area of business that has me most concerned right now is the healthcare business.
Yeah.
Through this whole crisis that we've had, we focused so much on COVID-19 and making sure we have intensive care beds available, ventilators, doctors, nurses, support staff, and all of that. The hospitals have done a wonderful job of providing those services and having them available. But we're at a point where they're not being utilized. And at the same time, hospitals across the country have totally stopped all elective surgery and elective procedures. So unfortunately, there are people that need, for example, cancer treatments, and they can't get them because the hospitals aren't open. There are people that need screening tests for serious issues that they may have, and they're not getting them done. So the in longer we keep hospitals closed, and beyond that is a lot of hospitals now are furloughing people, are asking staff to take cuts in pay. This is probably the most critical industry that we have in this country. We flattened the curve to allow them to give us the care that we need to deal with this virus. And in the end, at this point, we have hampered and really handicapped the medical facilities. And again, you just don't push a button and a hospital opens up. You've got to contact all your employees that need to be there, have them come back, all the supplies that you need.
Mhm.
Um, all of that is quite troubling to me. And I think we need to take a long, hard look at and well, actually a short, hard look of how do we get industries and businesses to open back up again and be productive.
Mm. Let's talk about the essential services. That is the area that you mentioned that is really, they're the frontline people. And we're not just talking about the medical people, but I just think of all the people who are in the retail establishments that are still trying to help people at grocery stores and so forth like that. They go to
Right.
work every day, but if you had a big time say in what precautions and how you protect the health of employees, what would you be doing?
Well, I look at other countries and what they have done or are doing, and I would look at the data that is out there on this virus. I don't think it's just anecdotal. I think that the virus has spread far wider than we have test results to show.
Yeah.
And as we do more testing, we're going to find that more people have been exposed to this virus. And the numbers I've been seeing in The Economist and other sources are saying well over 80%, maybe 85 of the people who are in contact with the virus either show no symptoms, asymptomatic, or the symptoms are so mild they don't even check with a doctor or go in. So when you look at all of those numbers as they continue to grow and expand, we shouldn't be fearful of that. That should be reassuring because herd immunity is happening. And when you then balance that against the unfortunate mortality rate that we have, or the deaths that we have, we'll find that the rate continues to go down, drop lower and lower, because the overall number of people who are exposed to it are indeed much higher. Now, as far as industries, God bless the people that have been out there and helping us, supply groceries. And you go to a store and one week they're short on toilet paper. The next week it might be a cereal. Next week it's bananas. But they're there, they're working, they're keeping things going for us to stay as comfortable as we can at home.
Mm.
The biggest challenge is the people that don't have jobs. I'm retired, so my paycheck just stayed steady. And I'm very fortunate. But there are many, many people who are home trying to figure out not just how to buy groceries, but they've got rent that they have to pay, or house mortgage payments. They've got cars they're paying for. They've got heat, all the normal bills that come in every week and every month. And if they don't have a job, how are they going to manage? And the stress that that causes will have long-term impacts on social services. Can they provide the support these people need to help them through this time?
Mm.
And again, that's why, in my mind, reopening as quickly as possible, and as rationally as possible, I think is so important.
Well, speaking of that,
One example to go ahead.
I was just going to say, so do you think then that federal and state officials have taken the right amount of precautions and the restrictions that they're, placing on the average people today?
Well, unusual for me, I think the federal government did a really good job early on of containing quickly, of doing what they needed to do as a country, and then rightfully putting the opening back in the hands of mayors and local government. That's where it needs to be. But I'm quite disappointed with what I'm seeing happen in some states. And I'll use Illinois as an example. The biggest issue and concern for Illinois is in the city of Chicago. Yet the governor is trying to control the entire state based on what he's seeing in the city of Chicago. And the city of Chicago, I think, has gone overboard and over restrictive. And, we do have, in the midst of all this, there's constitutional rights that have to be considered. And so we need to be sure that we're doing a fair job of considering our people in a safe manner. And when we reopen with social distancing and masks, I think it can happen much more quickly than I'm seeing the plans of a lot of states putting in place.
Hmm.
And then there's other states that are doing a wonderful job. And as far as what did they do in response to it? I've been watching and reading about Florida, a state that has a lot of people in a very high risk category, right? And a lot of people in healthcare facilities and nursing homes. And yet they managed, by focusing on that, they managed to keep the rate of infection down, but more importantly, the rate of mortality down. And they did a great job. And we have other states that are in a whole different environment, wide open farming states, and yet some of those states are trying to keep it very restrictive based on a small geographic concentration of people. And they need to reevaluate that, from my opinion.
All right, and just to let folks know again that this is Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand. Usually we do this program in a studio, but because of COVID-19, we're doing this special program today with Jim Rabe, who is formerly Vice President for Environmental Health and Safety at the Masonite Corporation, which is, by the way, based out of Florida. So how have you tried to guide your family to live in these days of shelter in place?
Well, Mark, we have two sons. They're 22 and 20, both in college. They're both home, and ever since spring break, they're home. We did have a little trip in between, and but they're home now doing virtual studies. And frankly, they're in classes all day long, Monday through Friday, and working quite hard in the evenings and on weekends to keep up with all the work that they have to do. Um, what I've been encouraged by, and certainly, these are independent young men now. They've been off at college, and
Mhm.
coming back home while we're their parents, it's a new dynamic, right? And it's every day. We're in each other's hair every day. We need to work that out. My wife Lila, she started at evenings at dinner, and I really appreciate this so much. We're reading one chapter of Mere Christianity, and after we eat, and we just keeps us together, and we talk through some issues. We talk just about what's going on in our lives, what are our concerns, and that helps us to keep our focus on how God is part of all this,
Mhm.
and in the midst of it all, how we keep ourselves well grounded in our Christian beliefs.
If you contracted the virus yourself, what would you do to ensure the best hope of recovery, or maybe it could be said another way, what would you not do?
Well, that's a great question. Of course, we have good fortune of the doctor that we work with has sent out information that helps you to, what do you do to prepare for this? The first thing is making sure that you take the right supplements to help your body build its immune system and make it as strong as you can. Vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin K, and others, vitamins and supplements that you can take that again help strengthen your own body's ability to ward off or fight if we do get the virus. But we've kind of, it's not a contract, but we certainly have a plan that based on what our doctor has said that we would follow, and we would reach out to him right away. And it's through the use of the hydroxychloroquine and antibiotics. We're also watching, other new drugs that are being developed, and we're tracking those, and we want to be smart about what we do. But our concern is in understanding how the virus works, how this particular virus really attacks the respiratory system and the lungs' ability to transfer oxygen to the bloodstream, which is vital for us to continue fighting any antibiotic or any antigen that gets into our body. But more than that, being able just to continue to survive with the metabolism that we have going. So it's oxygen therapy would be very much a part of what we would like to see done. Uh, and if we can avoid a ventilator, not that they're bad for the right use, but I think that initially we thought that was the answer, and the doctors are seeing some damage to lung tissue with the overuse of ventilators, or possibly use too soon. And
Mm.
it's understandable. When you're in a hospital setting and you've got lots of people coming in, you get into a routine, you get into a mode of, here's what I do in these circumstances. And so I think doctors are doing their best with all the resources they have. Um, from our case, Lila and I, we would like to try and avoid a ventilator as long as we can and go with oxygen therapy as much as possible.
Mm.
But at some point things get out of your own control, and we know that we're in God's hands, and He has control of this. And if our doctors decide that the ventilator is what we need, and that's the path that we would follow, and trust God to guide our path.
Well, just as this virus was really kicking into gear and travel restrictions were being put on, lo and behold, but you had a trip planned with your family, and it initially started with you and your two boys traveling to, I believe, down to New Zealand, and then your wife was going to join you down there. Everything got complicated. That was quite an adventure.
Well, it did. A week before we were due to leave, Johnny, the younger one, had a trip planned with a cappella singing group from school down to Australia. So Lila and I had our plans set to go meet him there briefly and then tour Australia. We've never been there. And then they canceled his trip, and Jimmy, the older boy, had a trip scheduled with school that was also canceled. So they said, hey, the last week of classes are virtual online, and finals are going to be virtual online. Why don't we add New Zealand to the trip and go there a week before Australia and still go to Australia as a family? So we said, okay, that sounds great. Lila was going to stay home and watch her mom, who's in a healthcare facility close by. So she was not going to join us in New Zealand. And so we get over there. And the day after we arrived, Australia shut down um, arrivals in their country until people had quarantined for 14 days. So that pretty well knocked Australia off our plans. And the next day, New Zealand did the same thing. Now, we were already in the country, so we didn't have to quarantine, but it meant Lila couldn't join us there either. So she was at home with odd hours trying to keep up with us, and she was our travel agent, working with us and saying, hey, would you like to do this? Look at this. You could go here. And she did a wonderful job of finding places for us to go, places to stay, restaurants, making reservations. And so the three of us, my two sons and I, had a great guys week and a half in New Zealand, and we saw a lot of the country. The challenge came then in getting home. The flights that I had were canceled, rebooked several times till finally I could get out. And the boys were not able to join me on that flight. It took them 3 more days before they could get a ride home. But I'll tell you what was interesting, Mark, is while we were there, besides seeing a wonderful country, and if anyone has a chance, I'd recommend they get and go there. But we could see that the country kind of closing in as we were traveling through the country, and different things that we did. People would make comments like, this is probably the last week we're going to be able to do this tour, because with COVID-19, we know that they're going to be closing down. Some places they said, well, this is really going to be our last tour, or this is our last night that the restaurant's going to be open. And it was kind of an eerie feeling as we sat on the sidewalk on Monday in Christchurch, and they had just announced going to phase 3, and we had been walking down the main street of this good-sized city, and people were putting up signs, closed till further notice, locking the door. You could hear them locking and turning lights out.
Yeah.
And it was just an eerie thing to watch that happening. And they were not at phase 4 yet. That wasn't going to happen until Wednesday of that week. We saw the country closing down, and it certainly, we had to hunker down then for 2 days in our hotel room. And fortunately, they were still serving food in the restaurant there, so we didn't have to manage that too much.
Mhm. Well, your boys, as you mentioned, are home from college. How do you sense that just in your conversations with them, this is affecting their perceptions about how safe the world is and whether or not life is going to kind of get back to normal anytime soon for them?
Well, that's certainly in their minds, and they're staying very much in touch through social media with their friends and their groups. And sometimes they'll have like a virtual get together for an hour, and there's doing Zoom like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Just chatting and doing things. On weekends, a lot of times they'll end up playing group games where 5 or 6 of them will get together and they'll play a game for 3 or 4 hours and sharing and talking and staying in touch. The challenge for them too is when does this open? When do I get a job for the summer and where? And Jimmy, as a senior, we don't know when the graduation ceremony will happen, but he does have a job that he had secured actually last fall to start in August, and that's been delayed till September. But that's a hard line for them, assuming everything will move as planned right now from a reopening standpoint. So he's making plans to go off to New York City and start his work there in September. And so as a family, we're trying to understand and plan options for what do we do for the summer together. If the boys both want to work and if they can't get jobs because there are so many people out of work, right? And what they would get for a summer job would be a lower level job. And people need to feed their families. And certainly they should choose those folks over college students. And yet college students need the experience and money as well. So we're just trying to look at what can we do for the summer together as a family. Um, and that's kind of an exciting time to reconnect. And we haven't had this much time together, the 4 of us, since before they went off to college. And even then, they were busy with things in high school. And so it's great to have them home.
Yeah.
And we know that will change. So we look at this as an opportunity to grow our communication skills. I'm working on it and I need patience, but also to understand how deeply we do love each other and how much commonality we have.
Jim, we're virtually out of time here, but I want to make sure I ask you just very quickly to just explain how your spiritual life has helped you during this time.
Many times, going back almost 20 years now, when I had bypass surgery and cancer surgery, very much my faith was cemented in understanding that should I die, and when I die, I'm going to, we all are. I know that my eternity is going to be spent with Jesus in heaven, and I know that. And this just brings that freshly into my mind and my heart. And I find that it's easier to pass over my own pride in situations that can come up, either whether I'm driving or being gracious to people in the store or with my own family.
Hmm.
And knowing how Jesus has impacted my life and how God is a very much a part in the forefront. Trying to be more patient and understanding, and trying to show others the love of Christ in my life is very much how I'm trying to live each day.
Mm. Well, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today to kind of walk through these challenging days from a viewpoint of somebody who's been involved in helping the safety of a major corporation. We appreciate you taking the time to do this for us today, Jim.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and share our points of view.
And again, for those watching, for over 42 years, Jim Rabe was the Vice President for Environmental Health and Safety at Masonite Corporation, the manufacturer of quality door products based out of Florida. And that concludes this week's episode of Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand.